And I'm not claiming to know that, but I think you would be using the same methodology I was telling you about. So let's look at the neural basis of emotional intelligence versus IQ, just to give you a sense of why this matters. If you humor me, this is like a side view of the brain. Just go along with that, okay? The brain evolved from the bottom up in evolution. And the brain is basically an elegant machine for survival and has been shaped by what works in survival. It turned out that among mammals, once we got to mammals, you needed to have a brain that registered emotions, because emotions have, in evolution, the primary survival function. There's one structure in the midbrain that's called the amygdala, which is the brain's sentinel, has a privileged position in perception. Everything we see in every moment goes mostly to the sensory cortex, but a small part of it goes to the amygdala. Not to other structures, but to the amygdala, which scans it to see, is this a threat? That's a constant question in evolution. Is this a threat? Or more generally, the amygdala has presumably been the structure that answers the one critical question for survival: do I eat it or does it eat me? This is not a question you want to go Google. Because in evolution, if you do, it just ate you. And so you didn't pass on this design of brain to us. The amygdala is a hair trigger. In other words, it would rather be safe than sorry. It gets a very fuzzy picture of what's going on. But if it thinks it has a match, it has the ability to trigger what's called the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This creates a rush of stress hormones. It changes the entire way the brain prioritizes information. Once this axis has been triggered, it means that, for example, if the emotion is fear, everything relevant to what's scaring us is what preoccupies attention. It captures attention. It changes the hierarchy within memory so that we remember and think about only what pertains to the thing that's scaring us at the moment. And it does all the other things of the classic stress response. It sends energy to the limbs so we can run or fight and flee or freeze, whatever. So it's the classic fight, flight, freeze trigger. The problem is that the amygdala functions today the way it always has, and we don't operate in a world now that has actual physical threats. We operate in a complex symbolic reality where what we face are complex symbolic threats. He's not treating me fairly. She's dissing me. Whatever it may be, these threats today trigger the HPA axis, the amygdala. And so when we are caught in the grip of a distressing emotion, it means that attention narrows and fixates, and we get into a state which is suboptimal for most of life in ways I'll unpack for you. Now, one of the things that the amygdala does is create, when it really thinks something's urgent, create what's called an amygdala hijack, the signs of which are three. You have a very strong emotional response. It's very sudden and intense, and you do something or say something or send an email that when the dust settles, you really regret, right? That is a sign of an amygdala hijack. And it happens to really intelligent people because we get really dumb when the amygdala takes us over. Because we're being run by our fears and our anger, by emotional repertoires that were learned unconsciously in childhood. We become very childlike. Now, the good news is when we have an impulse from the amygdala, that goes up to an area just behind the forehead, which is the prefrontal cortex. How did that happen? Did you do that? It's okay. No problem. Sorry.
He's nothing but trouble.
You know the guy. So the prefrontal cortex is very important. It's the brain's executive center. The PFC draws together information from all over the brain. So when you're having amygdala hijack, like, this guy's not treating me right, I'm so pissed off I could slug him. I'm sure it never happens here, but just hypothetically, if you ever did. That impulse goes up to the executive center, and it scans all other incoming information. It kind of Googles the brain very quickly, and it comes up with that crucial fact you need to know now, like, oh, but this is your boss. Okay. Oh. So I'm not going to slug him, I'm going to smile and change the subject. And that is exactly the difference between purely cortical abilities, which operate solely in the top of the brain, the neocortex, that's where the IQ resides, and emotional intelligence abilities, which integrate the executive center and the emotional centers, because it's not just the amygdala, it's an extended network through the hippocampus and other elements. The amygdala is very widely connected throughout the brain. So when I talk about emotional intelligence, at the neural level, I'm talking about this neocortical, actually prefrontal, subcortical integration of abilities. Now, there are 4 parts to emotional intelligence, or 4 different domains. The first 2, I forgot something really important. Prefrontal cortex, while I'm on the subject, it turns out that when the amygdala hijacks, it drives and takes over the right side of the prefrontal cortex. If you do a brain imaging, when someone's having a hijack, someone's really scared or angry, you see a lot of activity in the amygdala and related circuits, and a lot of activity on the right. When we're feeling good, we're having a great day, we're good energy, I could take on anything, very enthusiastic and so on, you see a very different picture in the prefrontal cortex. The right is quiet and the left is highly active. Each of us, it's been discovered by a fellow named Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin, each of us has a resting ratio of right to left activation that predicts quite accurately our mood range day to day. There's a bell curve for it. Most of us are in the middle. We have good days, we have bad days. If you're very far to the right, it means that you're probably clinically depressed or have an anxiety disorder. If you're very far to the left, things just roll off you. You hardly ever have a bad day. And what the left does, that the right does not do, is have an inhibitory circuit for the amygdala. So the amygdala sends out these thoughts that could become what are called depressogenic thoughts, something really upsetting, or that could provoke anxiety or make you really angry. And the left prefrontal cortex basically says, shut up. I don't need to hear that now. And it calms the amygdala. So people who have this ability have more good days, more high energy, more self-confidence, more enthusiasm, and better moods.